to the gem of the Supreme Buddha. The Buddha is my refuge every day. My homage to the gem of the Supreme Dhamma. The Dhamma is my refuge every day. My homage to the gem of the Supreme Sangha. The Sangha is my refuge every day. My homage to the Supreme Triple Gem. The Triple Gem is my refuge every day. Namo Buddhaya. Meritorious disciples, our great teacher, the Supreme Buddha, attained supreme enlightenment over 2,600 years ago. Meritorious devotees, on that day, on that Vesak full moon poya day, the Bodhisattva sat under the Bodhi tree with a certain determination, with a certain goal. That goal was of becoming free from this long journey of birth and death, which is known as samsara. The Supreme Buddha on that day understood the reality of life, understood the Four Noble Truths, completely realized the dependent origination, how beings come into being in this world, and completely abandoned all craving and became the Samma Sambuddha in this world, became the only light that brightens the darkened lives of these beings who are traveling in this samsara. Meritorious devotees, our great teacher, the Supreme Buddha, through his Buddha eye, looked at the world and realized, Anama taggoyam bhikkhave sansaro pubbha kotina panyayati. These worldly beings are traveling in a long journey where its beginning cannot be discerned even to the Buddha's wisdom, even to the Supreme Buddha's knowledge. The Supreme Buddha is unable to see the beginning of this samsara. That's how long of a journey we have been traveling. Meritorious disciples, that's how long of a journey we have been traveling. And so after seeing the immense amount of suffering that beings go through in this long journey of birth and death, our great teacher, the Supreme Buddha, understood that these beings need a refuge. They need a protection. They need a way out of this suffering. Meritorious disciples, that is why our great teacher, the Supreme Buddha, taught us the way to find that refuge. The Supreme Buddha teaches us, Atta Deepa Bhikkhave Viharata, Atta Sarana Ananya Sarana. The Supreme Buddha teaches, O bhikkhus, make yourself your own island of refuge. Atta Deepa Bhikkhave, Atta Sarana Ananya Sarana. The Supreme Buddha explains, make yourself your own island of refuge. Do not depend on someone else to give you the refuge you need. The Supreme Buddha explains, Atta Deepa Bhikkhave Viharata, Atta Sarana Ananya Sarana. And then the Supreme Buddha explains, Dhamma Deepa, Dhamma Sarana Ananya Sarana. Make the Dhamma your refuge. Do not make an external thing your refuge. Meritorious disciples, our great teacher saw that these beings who are traveling in this long journey of birth and death need a refuge, need a protection. And the Supreme Buddha saw that protection cannot be gained externally. That's why our great teacher taught us, make you yourself your own refuge. Make you yourself your own refuge of island. For there is no other external refuge. And the Supreme Buddha explains, make the Dhamma the island of refuge. Make the Dhamma your protector, your refuge. Do not rely on something external to find that refuge. So, meritorious disciples, today we are going to learn a beautiful sutta that explains to us how we can make ourselves our own refuge. As you know, in the regular world, in the ordinary world, we always seek for protection, seek refuge from the external world. But in the Dhamma, a great teacher, the Supreme Buddha, teaches that refuge, that protection, that security can only be gained through your own self. So today we're going to learn how we can gain that refuge. Today we're going to learn a beautiful sutta found in the Anguttara Nikaya of the Pali Canon. The name of this sutta is known as the Patama Nathakarana Sutta. What's the name of the sutta? Patama Nathakarana Sutta. In this sutta, our great teacher, the Supreme Buddha, teaches, O bhikkhus, live with protection. Do not live without a protection. One without a protection lives with suffering. So what does our great teacher teach us? The Supreme Buddha explains, live with protection. So have protection in your life. Do not live without having a protection. One without a protection lives in suffering. And so it's very clear then, only those who has protection lives happily. If they do not have a protection, then these beings live with suffering. In the sutta, the Supreme Buddha explains, O bhikkhus, there are these 10 qualities that serves as a protector. So then how many qualities are there that serves as a protector? Yes, there are 10 qualities. The Supreme Buddha explains, what 10? Here, a bhikkhu is virtuous. So the Supreme Buddha explains the first protector. The first protector is virtue. The Supreme Buddha explains, here a bhikkhu is virtuous. He dwells restrained by the patimokkha, possessed of good conduct and resort. So what's the first protector, or what's the first factor that gives us protection? The first is virtue. As you know, virtue means the restraining of our body and speech. And so the Supreme Buddha explains, if a person is virtuous, then that person has gained his own protection. The Supreme Buddha explains, he lives virtuously, possesses good conduct and resort. So he observes the precepts and he makes sure that he has a good conduct. So in day-to-day life, he has a restrained conduct. His speech is restrained, his bodily actions are restrained. And he lives seeing the danger in minute faults. Now this is a very important factor. So not only is he just virtuous, but he sees the danger in minute faults. Now that means he makes sure that he does not do the slightest wrongdoing through body and speech. The Supreme Buddha explains, since a bhikkhu is virtuous, since he lives restrained by the patimokkha, this is a quality that serves as a protector. So the first protector to our life is not something external. It's something that we must develop within ourselves. and that first factor is virtue. Now, meritorious disciples, virtue means you observe the precepts and you protect the precepts. And if you do so, then you're protecting your life, not only just this life, but also your next life. As you know, if a person restrains himself from killing living beings, from stealing, from engaging in sexual misconduct, from lying, from taking intoxicating drinks and drugs, then he lives a happy life in this life, and he makes the necessary foundation to be reborn in a good destination in his next life. Meritorious disciples, if you're a person who kills living beings, then the Supreme Buddha explains in your next life you're reborn in hell. So now you can see how not being virtuous leads to insecurity, not only in this life but also in the next life. There is no protection, there is no refuge. But if you're a virtuous person, if you protect the precepts, then not only can you live a life of security in this very life, but also your next life will be of a good destination. There's a refuge for you even in the next life. But even more than that, if we think in a world transcending way, being virtuous means you can live a regretless life. The Supreme Buddha explains, the ordinary mind is always regretting because of the faults, because of the wrongdoings he or she has done. But if you're virtuous, you make sure that your bodily and verbal actions are restrained. And so as a result, you're able to live a regretless life. What's important here is that regretless life helps you to calm your mind. Meritorious disciples, that regretless life helps you to calm your mind easily. When you sit down for meditation, your mind does not roam around. That your mind does not feel any regret, and as a result you can easily calm your mind and you're easily able to attain meditative absorptions. And when you do so, you can easily understand the truth about life. When your mind is calm, that means jhana, then you can easily reflect on the truth about life and understand the truth about life. And that can lead you to escape from all suffering. So, meritorious disciples, virtue is indeed a protector to our lives. Next, the Supreme Buddha explains the second protector, or the second factor that gives us protection. The Supreme Buddha explains, again, a bhikkhu has learned much. He remembers what he has learned, and he accumulates what he has learned. So in Pali it's known as bahul sutta hoti. That means he has learned the Dhamma, and he has learned very well. He has learned much. And not only has he learned, but he also remembers what he has learned, and he has accumulated what he has learned. So he has a good knowledge or good store of the Dhamma that he has heard. And the Supreme Buddha explains, what has he accumulated? Those teachings that are good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good in the end, with the right meaning and phrasing, which proclaims the perfectly complete and pure spiritual life. Such teachings as these he has learned much of. That means Sutta. Meritorious disciples, the Supreme Buddha explains, so he has learned the Dhamma that's excellent in its beginning, excellent in its middle, excellent in its end, with right meaning and phrasing that teaches the complete and pure spiritual life. And he has heard this teaching, that means Sutta, So he has first heard and learned the teaching, and then he didn't stop there. Datha, he retained it in mind. So he learned the Dhamma and then he remembered, he retained the Dhamma that he has heard. Then Vachasa Parichita, he didn't just stop with just a memory, he continued the Dhamma practice and he recited what he has learned verbally. Vachasa Parichita. And then what he does is Manasanupekkita, he investigates the Dhamma mentally. That's what's known as Manasanupekkita. Then when he does those 4 things, Ditya Suppativita, he gets a very clear knowledge of the Dhamma. His view becomes purified, clear. That means he gets a good Dhamma knowledge that is very clear to him. He does not have any doubts. He does not have any questions about the Dhamma. He is very clear about the Dhamma. So the Supreme Buddha explains, when a bhikkhu is well learned in the Dhamma in this way, then that serves him as a protector to his life. The Supreme Buddha explains, this too is a quality that serves as a protector. So being well learned in the Dhamma is a protector to our life. And you may wonder how that comes to be. Meritorious disciples, our great teacher in one sutta teaches us that being well versed in the Dhamma is like having a store of weapons. Now, as you know, when you have a store of weapons, you can use that store of weapons when you're in battle, when you're in a fight. You can use the weapons to fight the enemy and win. In the same way, being well versed in the Dhamma, having a good knowledge, a good understanding of the Dhamma, is like a weapon. When we have to face our enemy, we can use that weapon to defeat our enemy. And you may wonder, who's our enemy? Our enemy is the heap of unwholesome thoughts that engulf our mind. As you know, our mind is filled with unwholesome things like anger, hatred, desire, delusion, jealousy. In this way, egoism, egoisticness, pride, vanity. In this way, all these unwholesome thoughts conquer our mind. But those who have a good knowledge of the Dhamma, when these unwholesome thoughts come to our mind, they quickly recognize that now my mind has been overcome by unwholesome thought, and so I must get rid of it. And so he quickly tries to get rid of the unwholesome thoughts that comes to his mind. For example, if a person gets angry, if a person is well versed in the Dhamma, then he knows that anger is unwholesome. It leads to bad consequences. And so if he is well versed in the Dhamma, then he understands how to get rid of anger. Spreading loving kindness leads to the abandoning of anger. So he practices loving kindness. This is how he uses his Dhamma knowledge to fight the enemy of unwholesome thoughts. So in this way, meritorious disciples, being well versed in the Dhamma helps you to gain protection in this life as well as the next life. Always try to get rid of unwholesome thoughts, then your life is pure, your life is filled with wholesome things. And if you are able to distinguish, if you have the good knowledge to distinguish between wholesome and unwholesome thoughts, then that means you have come to the right view in life. It's known as Samma Ditti. You're now capable of distinguishing between what's right and what's wrong. That means you have entered the path to Nibbana. And so if you travel that path and attain Nibbana, then you have indeed gained the real protection a being can gain in this life. That is, the bliss of Nibbana, the escaping of all suffering. But where did you start? You started with a good knowledge of the Dhamma. So, meritorious disciples, in this way the Supreme Buddha explains the second protector to our life is being well versed in the Dhamma. Next, our great teacher teaches us the third factor that gives us protection in this life. And that third factor is a bhikkhu has kalyana mittas, noble friends, noble companions, the association with noble friends. The Supreme Buddha explains, since a bhikkhu has noble friends, noble companions, a good association with noble friends, this too is a quality that serves as a protector. Meritorious disciples, kalyana mittas are an amazing protection to our life. But it's not easy to find kalyana mittas or noble friends. You may think it's easy to find, it's easy to gain the association with kalyana mittas, but it's not. Kalyana mittas are very special, they are very rare in this world. At one time, Venerable Ananda told our great teacher, the Supreme Buddha, O Venerable Sir, I feel that half of this dispensation is based on the kalyana mitta. And at that time, our great teacher taught Venerable Ananda, O Ananda, no. The complete dispensation is based on the kalyana mitta. As you know, the greatest kalyana mitta is our great teacher, the Supreme Buddha. A kalyana mitta always teaches the Dhamma to others out of compassion. A kalyana mitta has confidence in the Supreme Buddha, the Dhamma and the Sangha, and he helps others to gain confidence in the Triple Gem. A kalyana mitta is very virtuous and he helps others to be virtuous. He promotes virtue. He encourages others to protect precepts. He encourages others to go and protect precepts on poor days. In this way, he promotes virtuousness. And a kalyana mitta is well versed in the Dhamma and he encourages others to be well versed in the Dhamma. He helps them to read books. He helps them to listen to the Dhamma. He always encourages the value, he always promotes the value of having good knowledge of the Dhamma. And a kalyana mitta is very generous, he always gives, he's not stingy. And not only that, he encourages others, he teaches others, he promotes the good trait of being generous. And a kalyana mitta is very wise, and he encourages others to gain that wisdom, he helps others to gain that wisdom. So meritorious disciples, in this way, having a kalyana mitta is an amazing protector to our life. We can always rely on that kalyana mitta to seek guidance, because without a doubt we can gain good advice from a kalyana mitta. He never misguides others. The Supreme Buddha explains, if you have a kalyana mitta, then you must like to become virtuous. You must like to only speak wholesome speech, because if you're associating with a kalyana mitta, then you will never speak idle chatter, because kalyana mittas do not speak pointless words. They only speak the Dhamma. They only speak words that has proper meaning. In this way, meritorious disciples, having a kalyana mitta is an amazing protector to our life. And those who gain the association with kalyana mittas are able to hear the Dhamma that leads to the escapement of all suffering. Now, as you know, if you didn't gain the association with kalyana mittas, would you ever be able to hear that there is something called the samsara? Would you ever be able to hear that there is a possibility of escaping from the samsara? No. If our kalyana mittas didn't teach us this, then we wouldn't hear it. So having a kalyana mitta helps us to gain the real security, that is Nibbana. It helps us to gain the real refuge, that is, the escaping from all suffering. Next, meritorious disciples, our great teacher, the Supreme Buddha, teaches us the fourth factor, or the fourth protector to our lives. The Supreme Buddha explains again, a bhikkhu is suvacho hoti, that means a bhikkhu is obedient. He is patient and he receives advice, instructions respectfully. Since a bhikkhu is easy to correct and he receives instructions respectfully, since he is patient, this too is a quality that serves as a protector. So what's the fourth factor that serves as a protector? Yes, being obedient. The Supreme Buddha divides that even further and explains being obedient consists of two factors. If a person is obedient, then that person is very patient. Not only that, he also takes advice very respectfully. So when someone gives us advice, he takes that advice respectfully. And when he is in situations where patience needs to be taken into practice, he practices patience. So the Supreme Buddha explains, being patient is a protector to our life. Now you can think about this to your own life and see, if I was impatient at one time, what happened to me? Was I able to control the situation, or did the situation go out of control? As you know, being impatient always leads to bad consequences. But that's why the Supreme Buddha explains, if you're patient, if you're obedient, if you take advice given to you respectfully, then you're able to protect your life. In one sutta, the Supreme Buddha explains there are these five dangers. There are these five dangers of not being patient. That is, there are these five dangers of being impatient. The Supreme Buddha explains, if you're impatient, one is displeasing and disagreeable to others. Now you can see this through your own life. If at one point you were impatient, then were you agreeable to others? Were you pleasing to others, or were you displeasing to others, disagreeable to others? The Supreme Buddha explains, if you're impatient, then you're displeasing to others, and you have a lot of enemies, you have a lot of faults. And if you're a person who is impatient, then when you die unmindfully, and upon death you're reborn in a bad destination. Those are the five dangers of being impatient. So being impatient leads to bad consequences in this life as well as the next life. That is why the Supreme Buddha explains, if you're patient, then you're able to gain protection in this very life as well as the next life. Meritorious disciples, being obedient means you accept the advice given to you. When a Kalyana Mitra shows you what's right from wrong, then you take that advice and you take it respectfully and you follow it. Having this trait is very important because it helps you to gain real protection. So that's a fourth protector that we can gain to our life. And then the Supreme Buddha explains the fifth protector. The Supreme Buddha explains again, a bhikkhu is skillful and diligent in attending to the diverse chores that are to be done for his fellow monks. He possesses sound judgment about them in order to carry out and arrange them properly. Since a bhikkhu is skillful and diligent, this too is a quality that serves as a protector. So then what's the fifth protector to our life? Yes, being skillful and diligent in attending to the diverse chores that are to be done for his fellow monks. Now, as you know, there is something called vata or vat in the Supreme Buddha's dispensation. That means work work to support the community. So a protector to our life is being very skillful and diligent in doing this work. So doing work is a protector to our life. But what we must understand is we must do this work skillfully and diligently. As householders, you may sometimes feel, oh, I have a lot of work to do. I do not have the time to practice the Dhamma. But that's not how you should think. The Supreme Buddha explains, you must be very diligent and skillful in the work that needs to be done. You must make sure all that work is complete. And you must do this based on metta, karuna, mudita and upekha. That means based on the 4 sublime states. When you do work, whether for yourself or others, you must do so with a mind of loving kindness. When I do this, others will feel comfortable. For example, if you're a person who cooks at home, if you're the one who cooks for your family, you must not think of it as a chore, as a headache. You must do so. You must cook for your family, for example, with a mind of loving kindness. You must think, oh, when I cook for my family, they can live without hunger. When they're not hungry, they can live happily, they can live comfortably. And I collect merit and they can live happily. In this way, you must think in the right way, and you must become very skillful and diligent in the work that you do. The Supreme Buddha explains, the person who has understood the Dhamma is like a cow who does 2 things. Is like a cow who takes care of its calf as well as eat the grass. So the cow who has a newly born calf has to take care of the calf as well as she has to make sure that she eats the grass. So the Supreme Buddha explains, the person who has understood the Dhamma is like a mother cow who takes care of the calf as well as a person who eats the grass. That means the person who has understood the Dhamma, he does all the work that needs to be done. But while doing so, he has a very keen goal of practicing the Dhamma as well. So he has that goal in his mind all the time, and with that goal of practicing the Dhamma, he makes sure that he completes all his work diligently and skillfully. So this is a trait that a person who has come to the Noble Eightfold Path possesses. Next, our great teacher, the Supreme Buddha, explains the 6th protector to our life. The 6th protector, the Supreme Buddha explains, is again, a bhikkhu loves the Dhamma and is pleasing in his assertions, filled with lofty joy pertaining to the Dhamma and discipline. The Supreme Buddha explains, since a bhikkhu loves the Dhamma, this too is a quality that serves as a protector. So now what's the 6th protector to our life? Yes, loving the Dhamma. And not just loving the Dhamma, wanting to teach the Dhamma that he has heard, and gaining lofty joy when he practices and reads the Dhamma. It's stated here, he's filled with a lofty joy pertaining to the Dhamma and discipline. That means when he hears the Dhamma, when he practices the Dhamma, he gains joy. And that joy, meritorious disciples, helps him as a protector to his life. So what's the 6th protector to our life? Yes, loving the Dhamma and wanting to teach that Dhamma to others, and gaining joy through practicing the Dhamma, Now I'm sure you have experienced this yourself. Sometimes when we read suttas, we can gain an amazing joy that we cannot gain from anything else. And meritorious disciples, that joy helps us to calm our mind. When we gain that joy, our mind is very open, it's very bright. And that state of mind helps us to calm our mind easily. When our mind becomes calm, then when we practice meditation, we are easily able to gain absorptive states of meditation, that is jhana. And when our mind is calm and when we reflect on the Dhamma at that moment, we can easily understand the Dhamma. So loving the Dhamma and experiencing this joy out of the Dhamma is indeed a protector to our life. So you must understand this. If you have this practice of protection in your life, then you can be happy. But if you do not have this protector in your life, then you must try to gain that protector. That means you must love the Dhamma, and you must teach the Dhamma to others, and you must try to experience the joy out of practicing the Dhamma. If you do so, then you can gain a real protection to your life. Meritorious disciples, next our great teacher teaches us the seventh protector to our life. The Supreme Buddha explains, here a bhikkhu has aroused energy for abandoning unwholesome qualities and acquiring wholesome qualities. He is strong, firm in exertion, not casting off the duty of cultivating wholesome qualities. This too is a quality that serves as a protector. So here the Supreme Buddha explains, the aroused energy one has for abandoning unwholesome qualities is a protector to our life. Now that means, if unwholesome things overcome your mind, then you make an effort, you have aroused energy to abandon that unwholesome thought. For example, if you feel jealous, then those who have aroused energy, what they do is they quickly realize, or they quickly recognize the fact that now their mind is filled with jealousy, and they try to abandon jealousy. How do you do that? The Supreme Buddha has explained that you can abandon jealousy by practicing appreciative joy, means being happy upon seeing others develop. So this is a protector to our life. Having aroused energy to abandon unwholesome qualities, unwholesome things, is a protector to our life. That's the seventh quality that serves as a protector. Then the Supreme Buddha explains the eighth protector to our life. The Supreme Buddha explains, a bhikkhu is content with any kind of robe, alms, food, lodging and medicine, and this being content with what he has is another factor that serves as a protector to our life. Meritorious disciples, being content with what we have means we're happy with what we have. If we're happy with what we have, then we do not turn to wrong methods to gain things. As you know, in today's world, a lot of people, because they're not happy with what they have, they're not content with what they have, they turn to wrong doings. They steal, they engage in sexual misconduct to gain what they want, because they're not happy with what they have. That's why the Supreme Buddha explains, being satisfied with what one has is a factor that serves as a protector to oneself. That's the eighth factor. And then the Supreme Buddha explains the ninth protector, and that is being mindful and possessing supreme mindfulness and alertness, and being able to recollect what one has done and taught. The ability to remember and recollect what one has done and spoken. So here the Supreme Buddha explains, when a person is mindful, when he can recollect what he has done, then he can reflect on his actions, verbal, mental and bodily actions, and he can see, what have I done right, what have I done wrong. When he can remember this, he can try to abandon what he has done wrong. He can abandon the wrongdoings, and he can cultivate what is good in his life. So this is also a factor that leads us to gain a real protection in life. And the last protector to our life, the Supreme Buddha explains, is wisdom. The Supreme Buddha explains the ability to see the arising and passing away of all things in this life, the ability to understand the truth about life, is another factor that leads for our protection. The Supreme Buddha explains wisdom is the final protector to our life. As we know, those who have wisdom are those who understand the Supreme Buddha's Dhamma. That's why the Supreme Buddha explained, Panyavanta sayandammo nayandammo duppanyasa. This Dhamma is for the wise, not for the unwise. Today we learn 10 factors that serve as a protector to our life. Being virtuous, being well versed in the Dhamma, having kalyana mittas, being obedient, being patient, and being diligent and skillful in doing one's work, and loving the Dhamma, and finding joy, gaining joy through the practice of the Dhamma, and the ability to abandon unwholesome qualities by having aroused energy, and being mindful and having wisdom. All these factors serve as a protector to our life. It leads us to happiness in this life as well as the next life. So, meritorious disciples, we must understand that in this long journey of samsara, we were not able to practice these 10 factors, because if we did so, then we would have gained the real refuge, real protection to our life. But so far we have not gained that refuge, we have not gained that protection. So in this rare moment that we have gotten, in this rare opportunity to associate with Kalyana Mittas and listen to the noble Dhamma, we must make a strong determination to practice these 10 factors to our life, practice these 10 protectors to our life, and gain the real security one can gain in this Gautama Buddha's dispensation. So I bless you. May you have the opportunity to realize the 4 noble truths in this Gautama Supreme Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Namo Buddhaya.